And now let's continue to our next session, which is a prepared speech. Today we have one prepared speech to be given by Patti Adams, a very experienced Toastmaster. And her evaluator would be Kelly. So may I invite Kelly to the stage to introduce Patti's speech. Kelly Hayes. Thank you.
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. It was so eloquent. I wanted to be on my actual laptop today, and I'm on my iPad, and I can never remember how to use my Zoom on my iPad. So sorry, everybody. Okay. Patti Adams is going to deliver a speech tonight called Daily Dose of Awareness and Prevention. And it is in her Effective Coaching Path, project number 4 or project number 2, create a podcast. Present a speech to introduce a 5 to 10 minute segment drawn from a podcast of minimum 60 minutes of content created by the speaker. This is exciting. We get to hear part of a podcast or something similar. I'm looking forward to it. Over to you, Patti. So how long is it? 3 minutes plus 10 minutes?
Yeah, that's also my question. Yeah. Oh, sorry to interrupt there.
The introduction portion will be 2 to 3 minutes. So I will actually introduce the podcast that is coming up. And then the podcast itself, it's like 5 to 6 minutes.
So what's your total that Daniel should time?
He should time the 2 to 3 and then stop and time 5 to 6 or 5 to 7.
Great. Now that we're all clear, over to Patti.
No problem. Thank you. That was great to make sure that everyone knew what was going on. So thank you, Kelly, for introducing me. Hello, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters and guests. My task for this particular Toastmasters assignment was to create a podcast. I've never done a podcast before, so I knew nothing about the process until I read over the project. Some of the information given was familiar to me, but a lot of it I had to learn as I go. But it was worth the effort and the time spent doing so. For my podcast, I used my Snowball Blue mic. You all might remember that presentation. I did a presentation on that neat little instrument. QuickTime Player and my MacBook Air for the recording portion. I located some free music from YouTube for my opening and closing and had my husband, DTM Bruce Adams, use his video editing software, ProPresenter, to merge all the files together. The podcast was converted into a video, as most social media sites do not allow audio uploads. From this point, I was able to share the podcast to Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Nextdoor, which is a neighborhood site. The kickoff date for the podcast was 4/1/21. The information you will be hearing is sensitive in nature. Therefore, at this time, you may want to turn the recording off. And if you have children in the room, you may want to make sure that they're not available to hear this message until their parents are ready for them to hear it. This evening, I will invite you to listen to a 5 to 6 minute video provided by Scars of the Past Ministry. Every April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month nationwide. During this month, individuals and organizations present topics, do webinars, podcasts, and events to bring awareness and prevention to the general public, to sexual assault victims and survivors. I had some additional people collaborate with me on this project. For our first podcast, Parents Have the Talk with Your Kids, which is a segment that helps parents have open conversations with their children about appropriate and inappropriate touch in regards to sexual assault, was very educational. The original version was in English, and then the podcast was translated into Spanish, Cantonese, Mandarin, and Tagalog. I was so grateful to those who offered to assist me with this project. Because of their willingness to serve, it took this project to an entirely different level. Some of the other segments featured on the podcast was Victims' Impact Statement, the court system, statute of limitations, and victims' compensation. I also interviewed several sexual assault survivors who shared their life stories about the abuse before and after. The total of all the views across social media sites for our first podcast was over 300, so I would say it was successful. Please sit back and listen to parents have a talk with your kids. Welcome to Scars of the Past Ministry. I am your host, Patti Adams, DTM and MSP. Scars of the Past is a nonprofit ministry that supports and assists victims of sexual violence. We do this through a holistic approach that allows the victim to become victorious through building faith, trust, resilience, and character. By doing this, the victims will be able to approach life with hope and be productive in their society. We are very passionate about educating our community on ways to stay safe and guarding themselves from the enemy. Our motto is, we stand against violence, we stand for freedom. Our desire is no victim will live with lifelong scars, but instead will be able to walk in the destiny that God has chosen for each of them. Hello everyone, my name is Patti Adams, and I am the CEO and founder of Scars of the Past Ministry. We are a nonprofit 501c3 ministry that helps support sexual assault victims. This podcast is sensitive in nature. Parents, please listen. This month, we want to bring awareness to sexual assault. Did you know that according to RAINN, every 73 seconds an American is sexually assaulted, and every 9 minutes that victim is a child? Meanwhile, only 9 out of 1,000 perpetrators will end up in prison. Today, I want to speak to the parents. The Bible teaches us to train up a child in the way it should go, and when it is old, it will not depart from it. Proverbs 22:6 from the Holy Bible. Please take some time and educate your children on sexual assault. They need to know early on what safe and unsafe touches represent. Take out 5 minutes today and talk to your child. Tell your children and then show them the areas on their bodies that is off limits. Be sure to use the accurate name of the body parts, not nicknames. Then spend some time explaining to him or her what to do when someone touches them in places that they shouldn't. The reason so many children are sexually assaulted is because they can be easily groomed. They either are too young to tell or too scared to tell. They often are not put on the witness stand if the case goes to trial. So you may be asking, how do I start this conversation? A great time to start it is when the young kids is doing bad time. As you are undressing them, you may want to say something like, Mommy and Daddy are the only ones who can undress you like this. We can only touch you here, and then point to that spot, and here, and point to the other spot if it is given to you in a bath. This would be the conversation with the boy. With the young boy, we can only touch you here, point to that spot. When touching you, it is only for cleaning your body. Let your children know that no one should rub you, kiss you, or any other form of affection other than your parents. This will be tough, but try to also let them know that even if Mommy and Daddy are doing something they are uncomfortable with, please tell them to stop. If you spend the night with family and friends, do not spend time alone with adults and do not let them touch you under any circumstances. Perpetrators may ask a child to touch or kiss their body parts. They might try to take pictures, and that's not okay either. Inappropriate touching may feel good or tickle, but that doesn't mean a child is at fault or will get in trouble for telling. If they are touching you, then scream and run and ask for help. If need be, you may even have to hide, bite, or scratch the adult until you can break free. A perpetrator can be anyone, and they might not look scary. They can even be another child. Talk to your teens and be informed of the laws. If a teen is 19 and dating a 15-year-old, it would be sexual offense against the 19-year-old, even if they are in love. Whatever you do, no matter how much the bad person tells you not to tell someone. You can tell your parent, your teacher, your pastor, your neighbor. Keep telling until someone hears you. One of the number one tactics used by the perpetrator is to tell the child that they will kill him or her or their family members if they tell. In most cases, this is simply not true. But many children hold on to this statement because they are driven by fear. Again, parents, remind your children, he or she will never get in trouble for telling. Have this open dialogue with your children will gain trust. It will allow your child to know that they can come and tell you anything at any time. Let them know that you will believe them and encourage them to tell. This segment has been how to have the sexual abuse prevention talk with your child. Now is the time to have the conversation, because the next 9 minutes may be too late. I hope that you have found this podcast helpful and will spend some time talking to your children today. By having open communication with your children while they are young will ensure their comfortability in speaking with you on all levels as they grow older.
Thank you very much, Patti, for giving us this. So may I invite Miss Kelly Hayes to evaluate the speech of Patti Adams. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Carmen. Okay, so the purpose of this project was for the member to be introduced to the skills needed to organize and present a podcast. So I'm going to divide my evaluation into the introduction bit and then the podcast bit, because the other purpose was to introduce his or her podcast to present a segment of the podcast. And I think in the beginning, yeah, Patti, you absolutely shared your challenges and your, basically you had no idea how to do a podcast. Neither would I. I thought this is a really interesting project because, like, where do you even start? Well, you told us where you started and your sort of thought process and how you got to the point where you could actually make a podcast. I think that the your ability to put it on social media, it's out there, right? We can go and listen to it again if we want to. That's amazing. I think that when I read through the evaluation sheet, it's kind of saying you can make this podcast, but I'm not sure that they actually expect it to be out in the open. So I feel you went above and beyond there. Now, in terms of your actual speaking in the first section, I found the first thing I wrote down was vocal variety. It was a little bit flat, but it was somber, right? It's a very serious subject. And so a somber tone of voice is quite appropriate for the subject matter. It was also factual, you're getting across things that, well, it was basically factual because you were telling us how you made your podcast. It wasn't about the subject yet, but it was about, this is what I did. One thing that I did want to let you know about was the eye contact. There wasn't a lot of eye contact in the beginning. I think maybe you were reading, not 100% sure, but you were not looking at the camera, which we never, it's hard to do on these things, but it would have felt a little bit more engaging with us if you had been looking at the camera. So try to remember to do that. Then the actual podcast itself, obviously I can't comment on eye contact because there was none. So again, I would say, okay, so it's a serious, very serious subject. You pitched it, and I mean, we, Yohei may not, it doesn't know, but we know you, and we know that this is a charity that's very close to your heart. I think you founded the charity, so you're very involved with this charity, and therefore using this as an example for your podcast is fantastic. Oh my goodness, it's red already? No. Okay.
I'm sorry. I totally forgot. I was so into your.
Oh, it's the green and yellow. Yikes. Okay. Right. So I'll stick to the facts. You had a very approachable and factual tone throughout the podcast. And I think that that's how it needs to be, because you don't want to make it overly dramatic and you don't want to, it's not, you don't want to make a big deal out of it, but this needs to happen. You know, this is what should happen. I thought it was very well organized podcast. And the question is, one of the questions on the evaluation sheet was, is it engaging to the audience? Now, with this particular audience, I mean, I have an 11-year-old stepson and a 6-year-old son. And so for me, yes, I knew a lot of that stuff anyway and do that. But many of the other participants here don't have children, but they do know children. They have, I mean, Victor, you do, but you know, they do have family and they do have children in their lives. And I think no one could in any way suggest that the message that you were getting out is not the right message. I mean, that's not really debatable. So I think it was engaging for our audience, and it was interesting to hear some of the statistics that you put out there, depressing, but interesting. And it gives a little hook to grab onto. I suppose, could there have been a little bit more energy? Possibly. Again, I went back and forward on this because in my mind I was like, but it's a serious subject. So could we have a little more energy? I think maybe a tiny bit, but really I struggled to find many points to give you as takeaway messages. A little more eye contact in the beginning, a little bit more energy in the podcast. But overall, I thought that was a very well delivered podcast, and I thought you met the criteria for this project very well. On my red card, I better stop. Well done, Patty. Well done.